What's up, everybody? Jay here from Tap and Turn Gaming, coming at you today with another EDH slash Commander deck tech video. But before we get into it, I just want to preface the video real quick. Apologies if I sound a little congested and under the weather, as I am currently both of those things. Feeling a little sick today, but I definitely wanted to try to get this video out there for you guys. I know we're a little late with this video. You know, we try to get one out once a week. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But regardless, today's deck tech is a little bit special. So I decided today to do a little bit of a retrospect slash revisit to the very first Commander deck that I ever made, which was for Kaalia of the Vast. So, you know, very iconic, very revered and feared Commander from back all the way from the original Commander precons. So I'm sure the majority of you know what Kaalia does, but for those of you that may not know, maybe you're new to Commander. Kaalia is a 4-cost via 1 and Mardu, so that's white, black, red, for a 2/2 legendary human cleric with flying. And whenever Kaalia attacks an opponent, you may put a angel, demon, or dragon creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking that opponent. So when I first saw this card back in the day, back, you know, from the original Commander precon releases, I was immediately drawn to this card and this deck that it was in, called Heavenly Inferno. So, you know, I'm the kind of player that likes to slam creatures down on the board and smash my opponent's face in. So, obviously, I was drawn to this particular deck. And back then, you know, it had some pretty solid cards in it as far as the pre-constructed deck, but obviously, over time, I made alterations and changes to it. And that's kind of what what today's video is going to be. It's going to be a look back at what this deck used to be. I'm going to leave a link in the description below to the 2 videos for the original deck tech of this particular deck. Back when Derek and I first started the channel, way back. Back then, we used to do our deck techs in 2 parts. Now we, you know, we have a much more streamlined and kind of flashier way of doing our deck techs these days. But you know, when we were first starting off, it was a little rudimentary. But you know, it was what it was. You know, it got the point across and got the deck tech across. But anyway, so yeah, I'm gonna leave a link in the description below so you can take a look at what this deck used to look like back in the day. But, you know, this deck's gone through very, very many changes and alterations, and I've cut things out and put things in many, many times over the years. I've rehauled this deck a couple of times over the course of its life, but right now I think I've landed on something that I really, really like. So let me ask you all a question. Right, whether or not you're a fan of Kaalia or not, you know, I'm sure some of you have probably played Kaalia. I'm sure a lot of you have probably played against her. So for those of you that have played Kaalia, what is the worst thing that can happen when you play Kaalia? Let me answer that for you. The worst possible thing is you put Kaalia down on the board and she immediately gets removed. Or you declare your attack step and then somebody removes her before you can attack. Or does something to her so that you can't trigger that ability. Because you have to attack. You don't have to necessarily hit your opponent, but you do at least have to have her survive up through your combat phase to start triggering that ability. So I'm sure a lot of you know, if you've played her, you probably have had the feel-bads many, many times if somebody has answers to her all the time. Because, you know, if you're playing Kaalia, you're building around that ability. And nothing's worse than not being able to get her to stick on the board. And that's kind of my biggest feel bad when I play my Kaalia deck is, she's only a 2/2, so she's very susceptible to burn and, just any kind of creature removal, really. Being such a fragile body for, not necessarily a high mana cost, but also not very low either. You put her down on the board for 4 mana, someone immediately shocks her, and now you get to pay 6 mana the next time you cast her. And by that point, you're probably falling behind because most of your creatures, if you're building around Kaalia, are going to be, CMC 6 and higher because you're playing angels, demons, and dragons. So, you might be caught floundering just trying to, be able to hard cast some of the creatures out of your hand because you can't necessarily get Kaalia to stick on the board. So, what I decided to do with this deck is kind of cut a lot of the win more cards and a lot of the other chaff out of the deck. Like enchantments that, grant all my creatures, like double strike and life link and all these other things. Cards that pump the power and toughness of my creatures. A lot of that just got, well, actually most of it, if not all of it, just got completely cut out of the deck. Because the way I see it, the one thing that you want to have happen when you're playing Kaalia is for Kaalia to stick on the board. So, what I've done with this deck now is I've gone a lot more spell-oriented as far as protecting Kaalia. So when we get into the actual deck tech, you'll see what I mean about that. But, it is still very creature-heavy, obviously. You want to be pumping out those angels, demons, and dragons, because that's the most satisfying thing, right? You attack with Kaalia, and you just slam a big, nasty demon or dragon or angel down on the board and just start smashing your opponent's face into dust. That's essentially what you want to be doing with this deck. So, what better way to do that than to have lots of answers to your opponent's answers to Kaalia? So that's kind of more or less what I've gone with the deck for right now. So let's get on into it, shall we? Let's take a look at how this deck has evolved over time. And again, you can go back and take a look at the deck tech for this deck when I first conceived it way back in the day. You can see how it's changed from then until now. There are obviously a lot of cards in it that are the same. Mostly in the creature base, you'd probably see that. But the big thing is lots of instants that protect the general, and also a much increased artifact count, mostly mana rocks, because, if Kaalia does happen to get removed off of the board, we want to be able to ramp back up pretty quickly to get her back out on the board when we get to pay that commander tax. So, let's start off with the creature base. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at the creatures from each kind of category. So we're going to look at the angels, we're going to look at the demons, we're going to look at the dragons. But first, we're actually going to take a look at the cards that aren't any of those creature types. We do have a few creatures in the deck, 4 to be exact, that are not angels, demons, or dragons, but they do play a pretty integral role in the deck. So first up is Mother of Runes. Mother of Runes is a 1/1 for 1 white mana, where you can tap it, target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. So, yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory, just a way for us to protect our general. Next we have Grand Abolisher. It's a 2/2 for 2 white mana. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. So essentially protects you and your things on your turn. So while it's your turn, your opponents can't basically do anything. Uh, obviously, they can, block with creatures if you're happening to attack them, but as far as casting spells and activating abilities, they can't do any of that as long as it's your turn. Next, we have 8.5 Tails, another 2/2 for 2 white mana with 2 pretty very nice abilities. The first one is pay 1 generic and 1 white. Target permanent you control gains protection from white until end of turn. And the second ability is pay 1 generic. Target spell or permanent becomes white until end of turn. So essentially more ways for us to protect Kaalia. If someone tries to throw a removal spell on her that happens to already be a white spell, we can just use that first ability, give Kaalia protection from white. If it happens to not be a white spell, we can make it white by paying 1 generic and making it white, and then we can use the first ability to give Kaalia protection from white. And then lastly, for the creatures that are not angels, demons, or dragons, we have Iroas, God of Victory, a 4-cost, 7/4 indestructible god. As long as your devotion to red and white is less than 7, Iroas isn't a creature, which is fine. We like it because creatures we control can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, so it gives our team menace. And then prevent all damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control. So not only does that, protect Kaalia from dying in combat, it also protects her from, any kind of burn or things of that nature while she's attacking. So it kind of gives you more peace of mind to send her in if your opponents have other things on their side of the board that could block her in combat. Alright, so now we're going to move into the big nasties, the angels, demons, and dragons. And first up, I think we'll take a look at the angels. So our first angel here is going to be Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight, a 5/5 for 7 with flying and first strike. And essentially what it does is it doubles all of the damage that you would deal to opponents. So if a source would deal damage to an opponent or permanent, an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, that source deals double that damage to that player or permanent instead. So it doesn't necessarily have to be your stuff that's damaging it. It can be another player's, but basically it just doubles all damage that you're going to be dealing. And then it also halves all the damage that you and permanents you control would take. So if a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent half that damage rounded up. So essentially halves the damage that you take and the damage that your permanents take. Then we have Angel of Despair, a 5/5 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target permanent. Pretty self-explanatory there. Then we have Aurelia, the War Leader, a 3/4 with flying, vigilance, and haste. When she attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. So lets you attack twice in one turn, which is pretty nice with Kaalia. You attack with her, slam some big nasty creature down on the board, and if you've got Aurelia out, you get a second combat phase, and you do it all again. Then we have Linvala, Keeper of Silence, a 3/4 flying angel. Activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can't be activated, so shuts off all activated abilities of your creatures, of your opponent's creatures, I should say. I'm sorry. Then we have Iona, Shield of Emeria, the ultimate feel-bad angel, especially if you're playing against someone that's playing a mono-colored deck. She's a 7/7 for 9 via 6 and 3 white. Obviously has flying, and when she enters the battlefield, choose a color. Your opponents can't cast spells of the chosen color. Pretty self-explanatory there. Then we have Avacyn, Angel of Hope. Everybody probably knows what she does. She's an 8/8 for 8 with flying and vigilance. And all permanents you control are indestructible. Pretty self-explanatory there as well. Then we have Archangel of Tithes, which is a 3/5 for 4 with flying. As long as it's untapped, creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. And as long as Archangel of Tithes is attacking, creatures can't block unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. So if you let it sit back on defense, make sure opponents have to pay to attack you, and if you're attacking with it, they have to pay to be able to block. So pretty good all around. Then we have Angel of Serenity, a 5/6 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile up to 3 other target creatures from the battlefield and/or creature cards from graveyards. And then when this leaves the battlefield, return the exiled cards to their owner's hands. So basically, a nice form of removal for us. You can do other kind of tricky things with this. You could exile your own stuff from your own graveyard, and then when this leaves play, you get those things back to your hand that you could potentially, play out later in the game. But most of the time, you're going to be exiling stuff off of your opponent's side of the board, or occasionally from their graveyard. Then we have Deathless Angel, a 5/7 for 6 with flying. Pay 2 white, target creature is indestructible this turn. So just more ways to protect Kaalia. And then lastly, for our Angels, we have Emeria Shepherd, a 4/4 for 7 with flying, with landfall. So whenever we play out a land, we can return target non-land permanent card from our graveyard to our hand, and if the land that we put out is a plains, that permanent goes straight to the battlefield instead. So that's our Angel package. Next up, we're going to take a look at our Demons. So first up, we have Overseer of the Damned, a 5/5 for 7 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target creature. No color restrictions or anything, just straight up destroy it. And whenever whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, you put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield tapped. It's there because it's a nice big body. When it comes in, it destroys something. I mean, it's nice that we can have the potential to get those 2/2 black zombie tokens, but we like it because it's a big flyer that kills something when it comes in. Then we have Archfiend of Depravity, a 5/4 for 5 with flying. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, that player chooses up to 2 creatures they control, then they sacrifice the rest. So if someone's trying to go wide, maybe with like a token strategy or something, this card will make that hurt a lot for that person. Then we have Bloodgift Demon, a 5/4 for 5 as well, with flying, and it's basically a Phyrexian Arena on a body. So at the beginning of your upkeep, target player draws a card and loses 1 life. So you can actually target your opponent with this, so it's a little bit different than Phyrexian Arena. But most of the time, you're probably going to be targeting yourself for the extra card draw. Then we have Archfiend of Despair, a 6/6 for 8 with flying. Your opponents can't gain life, and at the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life that player lost this turn. So kind of in a way, this also doubles damage that you deal. Not technically doubles all damage, but if you swing in with this and this hits your opponent for 6 damage, on the end step, they're going to lose 6 life. So effectively, you're kind of doubling the damage, but it's not exactly working that way. But still, nonetheless, very powerful card. Then we have Pestilence Demon, a 7/6 flyer, where you can pay a black, and it deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. So this can be good if you just need to get a couple more extra, points of life off the opponent to get them out of the game. Or, you can use this to essentially board wipe a token strategy for very cheap. So, and it's a pretty massive body with a 7 power and 6 toughness, so that's nothing to scoff at either. Then we have Rune Scarred Demon, a 6/6 with flying, obviously. 99% of our creatures fly. He costs 7 mana. Sorry, I had a bit of a brain fart there. And he's a demonic tutor on a stick. So a 6/6 body that flies that tutors you any card out of your deck and puts it in your hand when he enters the battlefield. Yeah, sign me up for that. Then we have Lord of the Void, a 7/7 4/7 with flying. When it deals combat damage to a player, exile the top 7 cards of that player's library, then put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield under your control. So not only is it going to smash your opponent pretty hard, it's going to steal creatures from their library if you happen to exile a creature among the 7 cards that you essentially mill off their deck when that hits them. Then we have Rakdos, Lord of Riots. He's a 6/6 for 4, which may seem pretty good, but he does have a drawback, but we kind of get around that drawback being in a Kaalia deck. So you can't cast him unless an opponent lost life this turn. But, we can get around that clause by just simply putting him into play tapped and attacking off of Kaalia's triggered ability. He has Flying and Trample, and creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. So he's pretty nice to have if, you swing in with him. He hits for 6. Now all your creatures are going to cost 6 less to cast. 6 colorless or 6 generic less to cast. So, that can essentially let you just quickly empty out your hand of other creatures that you have for very, very cheap and go very, very wide. Then we have Harvester of Souls, a 5/5 for 6 with Death Touch. Doesn't have flying, which is one of the very few cards in the deck amongst the angels, demons, and dragons that does not fly. But whenever another non-token creature dies, we may draw a card. So just some nice card draw there for us. And then lastly, probably one of the douchiest cards in the deck, Master of Cruelties. He's a 1/4 for 5 via 3, a black and a red with First Strike and Death Touch. Master of Cruelties can only attack alone. When Master of Cruelties attacks a player and isn't blocked, that player's life total becomes 1. And then Master of Cruelties assigns no combat damage this combat. So the reason why this is pretty douchey is you attack with Kaalia, you put this into play tapped and attacking your opponent. Obviously it doesn't go blocked, so now their life total becomes 1. And then Kaalia hits them for 2 and they're dead. So it's essentially just an instant kill on somebody if you're able to land it. All right, and that wraps up the demon package. Lastly, we're going to take a look at our dragons, which we have the fewest of. We only run 6 dragons. We run quite a few angels and quite a few demons. Very few dragons, but the dragons we do run are pretty impactful. So first up we have Bogarden Hellkite. It's a 5/5 for 8 with flying and flash, so you can cast it anytime you can cast an instant. But most of the time we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be probably putting it into play tapped and attacking with Kaalia. But why we like it is when it enters the battlefield, we can divide 5 damage amongst anything on the board, amongst any number of target creatures and or players. So that's why we run the Bogarden Hellkite. Then we run Steel Hellkite, a 5/5 for 6 with flying. You can pay 2 generic, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Or you can pay X to destroy each non-land permanent with convert a mana cost X whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. So pretty nice card. Can instantly wipe out an army of tokens just by simply hitting your opponent and paying 0. By doing that, you can just nuke the entire board of all creature tokens. But obviously, you can pay whatever you want to pay into that X cost to blow up whatever you need to blow up on the other side of the board that's giving you problems. Then we have Rhyme Scale Dragon at 5/5 for 7 with flying, where we can pay 2 and a mana from a snow permanent. So when we get into the mana base of the deck, you're going to see all the basics that we run are snow-covered basics, so that we can be able to activate this ability. But you pay that mana, and you can tap target creature and put an ice counter on it. And creatures with ice counters on them don't untap during their controller's untap steps. So it can allow you to essentially lock down your opponent's creatures and make it so that they can never untap as long as they have that ice counter on them. And we have Horde Smelter Dragon, a 5/5 for 6 with flying. And we can pay 3 and a red, destroy target artifact. Horde Smelter Dragon gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is that artifact's converted mana cost. So not only can we make him bigger, but we can destroy problem artifacts with him as well. We have Balefire Dragon, a 6/6 for 7 with flying. When he deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to each creature that player controls. So that's pretty self-explanatory, right? You hit your opponent for 6 with him, he's going to deal 6 damage to every single creature they have on the board, which is probably 90% of the time going to board wipe them. So, yeah, that's why we like Balefire Dragon. And lastly, for our dragons, we have Scourge of Care Ridges, a 6/6 for 8 with flying. Pay 1 and a red, it deals 2 damage to each creature without flying, or pay 5 and a red, it deals 6 damage to each other creature with flying. So most of the time you're probably going to be activating that first ability to essentially Pyroclasm. But if your opponent has opposing flyers out on the board that you desperately need to get rid of, he gives you access to do that as well. So that is the creature base. We run a hefty 30 creatures in this deck. 4 of them happen to be not of the angel, demon, or dragon variety, but they do, you know, some pretty nice integral things for the deck, like Mother of Runes protects Kaalia, as does 8.5 Tails, and Grand Abolisher protects our turn from our opponents being able to do anything while it's our turn. So that's very nice. Alright, so next up, we're going to take a look at the artifacts that we run. So more or less here, we run a lot of mana rocks, and then some equipments. So, you know, we don't run anything that's going to, you know, do anything else in our artifact package except ramp our mana, and equipments that will essentially protect Kaalia, or one equipment that does something very, very special. So first up, I guess we'll take a look at our artifacts. Well, yeah, we're already looking at that. Our mana rocks, I should say. So we've got Soul Ring, obviously. I mean, with having such a high curve of creatures in the deck, you know, if we have to be able to try to hard cast something, you know, Soul Ring's going to allow us to do that pretty effectively for just 1 mana. Then we run all the signets that we're able to run. So we run Boros Signet, Orzhov Signet, and Rakdos Signet. We also run the 3 Clue Stones that we can run in this deck. So that's Orzhov Clue Stone, Rakdos Clue Stone, and Boros Clue Stone. I chose these because, you know, they're going to give us the mana that we need to cast the things in our deck, and if we no longer need them maybe a little bit further down the road in a game, we can sacrifice them away by paying 2 mana of the color of that guild and then tapping it and sacrificing it to draw our card. So, you know, we can use it to ramp us, and then later on, if we don't need it anymore, we can cash them in for cards. And then the rest of our mana rocks, we're going to have a Chromatic Lantern, because probably one of the best mana rocks in existence. Makes all your lands be able to tap for any color of mana, and it itself taps for any color of mana. So, I mean, more or less a commander staple. If you want to be running top-notch mana rocks, Chromatic Lantern probably should be in your Mana Rock package. And then we have Dark Steel Ingot. Cost 3, it's indestructible, so that's always nice. Can't be destroyed. Taps for any color of mana. And then we have Vessel of Endless Rest, which probably isn't something that you see very often, but I felt like it was a really nice fit for this deck. So it's essentially a Dark Steel Ingot, just minus the indestructible, but also when it enters the battlefield, put target card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. So the reason why I like that is we have a pretty decent instant package, which we're going to take a look at next. So this allows us to basically get a second use out of an instant in our deck, because we have ways that we can just rip them straight out of our deck and cast them. So that's why I like Vessel of Endless Rest. I mean, it taps for any color that we need, and then it lets us put a card from our graveyard on the bottom of our library that we can just rip out later on. Alright, and then we're going to look at the equipments that we run. So we run Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots. So, the Greaves gives haste and shroud, and the boots give hexproof and haste. So, obviously the Greaves, probably something that you want to, prioritize over Swiftfoot Boots if you had to choose, because the equip cost is 0. But, sometimes it does matter. The hexproof, allows you to be able to target the creature. If you have Lightning Greaves on Kaalia, she's got Shroud, so she can't be targeted at all, even by your own stuff. So, certain situations, Swiftfoot Boots might be better, but most of the time you're going to want to aim to get the Lightning Greaves if you had to choose. And then we also run Sunforger, which is a very, very, very nice card for this deck, especially the way that I have it built currently. So it costs 3 to play and 3 to equip onto a creature. The equipped creature gets +4/+0, so that turns Kaalia into a 6/2. But the reason why we really like this card is because we can pay a red and a white and unattach it from whatever creature it's attached to. And then we get to search our library for a red or white instant card with converted mana cost 4 or less, and cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then shuffle your library. So when we start looking at the instants that we run in the deck, you're going to see why we really, really like that ability. And then we also run a Dark Steel Plate, because, it itself is indestructible, and then the equipped creature is indestructible. Costs 3 to play and 2 to equip. And then lastly, for our artifacts, we run a Strionic Resonator, because what this allows us to do is essentially double up on Kaalia's triggered ability. So whenever she attacks, we can activate the Strionic Resonator to essentially be able to dump out 2 creatures instead of 1. So when she attacks, we can copy it and then, do that triggered ability twice. So we get to slam 2 things down on the board instead of just 1, which is always nice. So that wraps up, I believe, the artifact package of the deck. So next up, we're going to take a look at the instants that we run. So this is kind of the biggest change that I made to this deck. A lot of these cards used to be, things that were kind of just win more. Things like True Conviction or Savage Beating or Waves of Aggression, or, things of that nature. Things that would, pump power and toughness, or, I think some of the other cards I cut was like Grave Pact and Palace Siege, and a lot of enchantments. So I basically cut just about every single enchantment that I had in this deck, and replaced it with some sort of instant that will grant, protection or indestructible, or things of that nature. So, because like I said, there's nothing worse than when you're playing Kaalia, where someone just has an answer to her like the second that you play her, or like right as you go to move to your attack step, somebody removes her. That gives you the feel bads. So this instant package is kind of our anti-feel bads. So we're going to take a look at these real quick. So we have Emerge Unscathed as our first one. 1 white mana for an instant. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. And it also has Rebound. So when you cast this, if you cast it from your hand, you exile it as it resolves. And then at the beginning of your next upkeep, you get to cast it again. So basically, you get 2 uses out of this. So this is, why we like Vessel of Endless Rest as well, because, we can cast Emerge Unscathed, and then we can rebound it, and then we can play out a Vessel of Endless Rest, put that Emerge Unscathed on the bottom of our library, and then if we have Sunforger attached to Kaalia, we can activate that and then rip out Emerge Unscathed out of our deck from the bottom if someone tries to, target Kaalia with some sort of removal. So, you can see why these things work pretty well together. Then we have Faith's Shield, 1 white mana for an instant. Target permanent you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. So this is really nice because it's target permanent, not just target creature. So, you could target something else if you really, really needed to. But it also has Fateful Hour, so if you have 5 or less life, instead you and each permanent you control gain protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. Pretty powerful effect, but you generally don't want to be at 5 or less life. So, it's there if you happen to be in that situation, but more or less you're just going to be using it as an answer to somebody's answer for Kaalia. Then we have Rebuff the Wicked. Again, one white mana instant counter target spell that targets a permanent you control. So, again, someone tries to remove Kaalia off the board, we can cast this in response and counter their answer to Kaalia. Then we have Apostle's Blessing. A 2-cost instant via 1 and a Phyrexian white, so we can either pay that with a white mana or 2 life. And then target artifact or creature you control gains protection from artifacts or from the color of your choice until end of turn. Then we have Bathe in Light, 1 and a white for an instant with Radiance, so choose a color, target creature, and each other creature that shares a color with it gain protection from the chosen color until end of turn. This can potentially give your opponent's creatures protection from a particular color, but most of the time you're going to be using this either to answer somebody's answer, or you can use this to push across a lot of damage if your opponent happens to have things that can block out your creatures. You can cast this and give your stuff protection from whatever color that their creatures are, and then just swing through. Then we have Boros Charm, a red and a white for an instant. Choose 1, deals 4 damage to target player or planeswalker, or permanents you control gain indestructible until end of turn, or target creature gains double strike until end of turn. Most of the time we're going to be using that middle ability, but the last one isn't bad either, being able to give a creature double strike. So, if you have a big nasty creature out on the board and you can finish somebody off by making it hit them twice, you have access to that with Boros Charm. But again, most of the time we're going to be using it as means to protect Kaalia. Then we have Center Soul, 1 and a white for an instant. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn, and has Rebound. So basically, Emerge Unscathed just for 1 more mana. Then you have Razor Barrier, another protection spell, another 2-cost 1 via 1 and a white. Target permanent you control gains protection from artifacts or from the color of your choice until end of turn. So it's pretty nice because it's target permanent. Doesn't have to target a creature, so if we absolutely need to protect something else on our side of the board that's not necessarily a creature, we have access to that. Then we have Chance for Glory, which is a new card from Guilds of Ravnica. Costs 3 via 1, a red and a white. Creatures you control gain indestructible. Take an extra turn after this one. At the beginning of that turn's end step, you lose the game, which may seem like a pretty shitty thing. But, if you're in a position to be able to win the game by essentially getting an additional combat phase, this is a pretty good way to do that if you can definitely, kind of see that you're going to win if you're able to attack a second time. It's a very good card to play. It's also something that we can rip out of our deck with Sunforger if it happens to be attached to a creature we have out on our side of the board. Just being able to rip any of these cards, because these all cost less than 4 mana, and Sunforger allows you to rip a red or white instant card with 4 or less mana cost out of your deck and just play it without paying its cost. So every single one of these cards we can just rip out of our deck with Sunforger. And then lastly, we have Make a Stand, 2 and a white for an instant. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible until end of turn. So we get that little power boost there, which is not bad. But most of the time, we're probably going to be using this as an answer to like a board wipe or something. Alright, so that is our instant package. It's 10 cards in total, so that's 10% of our deck dedicated towards protecting our general. Obviously, we have other things in the deck that allow us to do that. Some of our equipments and some of our creatures as well can protect Kaalia. But this is the biggest change that I made to the deck with the instant package, is basically just throwing in all kinds of ways to protect Kaalia. I felt like the best way to do that, as you can see, is with giving her protection from a color, because something like giving her indestructible isn't bad, but indestructible isn't going to stop exile, or isn't going to stop like a minus. So being able to just give her protection from a particular color, I felt like was the best way to go. Obviously, being able to get indestructible as well, because protection from a color isn't going to stop being killed from a board wipe. So I did want to mix in some cards that gave indestructible as well. But most of it, as you can see, is granting protection from a particular color. Alright, next up we're going to take a look at the sorceries that we play. We only run 3, and they're basically all tutors. So we run a Steel Shaper's Gift, which allows us to tutor up any equipment out of our deck and put it into our hand. Then we have Demonic and Diabolic Tutor. They essentially do the same exact thing, except Demonic Tutor only costs 2 and Diabolic Tutor costs 4. Just lets us search any card from our deck and put it straight into our hand. So that's our sorceries. Not very many. Again, only 3. Next, we're going to take a look at the one lonely enchantment that we play. I felt like this enchantment I wanted to keep in the deck. It's Phyrexian Arena, just for that extra card draw. Because, one of the weaknesses that we can have in this deck is if we run out of gas. If we don't have any cards in our hand and we're just in top deck mode, hoping to top deck a creature that we can shoot out with Kaalia, or top deck some sort of protection spell so we can guarantee that she is able to attack next turn. Phyrexian Arena just gives us an extra card every turn at the cost of 1 life. So I felt like that was appropriate to keep in the deck. And then next we're going to take a look at the 2 Planeswalkers that we run in the deck. So we run in Nahiri the Harbinger. She's a 4-cost Planeswalker via 2, a red and a white with 4 loyalty. We can +2 to discard a card if we do draw a card, or we can -2 to exile target enchantment, tapped artifact, or tapped creature. Or we can -8 to search our library for an artifact or creature card, put it onto the battlefield, and shuffle your library. It gains haste. Return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. So, obviously, if we can get to that ultimate, that's what we really like. Just being able to rip any creature out of our deck. It could also be an artifact, too. So, I guess it's kind of a way for us to tutor out some artifacts out of our deck. But most of the time when we activate this, it's probably going to be to rip out a big nasty creature and slam it down on the board and give it haste. And then it goes back to our hand at end of turn. So, at worst, it goes back to our hand, and then we can just put it back into play tapped and attacking next turn with Kaalia. And then we run Ob Nixilis Reignited. 5 cost with 5 loyalty, +1, draw a card and lose a life. So another Phyrexian Arena kind of ability. -3, we can destroy target creature. Flat out, no color restrictions or anything. And then -8, target opponent gets an emblem with whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. So you can use that to bleed somebody out pretty quickly if you happen to get to that emblem. Alright, so that is everything aside from the mana base, which is the last thing we're going to take a look at here. So with it being a 3-color deck, a little bit more of a complicated mana base than most other decks, but I feel like I got a pretty decent package here. So first up, we'll take a look at our duels, and we're going to do them by color this time. I know in my last video for Maresil, it was kind of just all over the place. But first up, we're going to take a look at the duels that we have that produce black and red. So we have a Blood Crypt, Black Cleave Cliffs, Sulphurous Springs, Dragon Skull Summit, Graven Cairns, Rakdos Carnarium, and Smoldering Marsh. Next will be the duels that we have that produce red and white. So we have Inspiring Vantage, Clifftop Retreat, Sacred Foundry, Ancient Amphitheater, Boros Garrison, and Temple of Triumph. Next we'll look at the duels that we have that produce black and white. So we have Orzhov Basilica, Caves of Koilos, Temple of Silence, Isolated Chapel, Fetid Heath, Godless Shrine, and Concealed Courtyard. Next up, we'll take a look at the lands that we have that produce all of our colors. So we have a Nomad Outpost, a Command Tower, obviously. And then we have Cavern of Souls, which, for all intents and purposes, what we're using it for, and why we have it in the deck, is going to produce any color that we need, or at least, in our commander's color identity for the most part. We can produce, mana of the other 2 colors that we don't play, but we don't really need to do that. But so when it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. So some of you might be thinking we might choose angels, we might choose demons, we might choose dragons. We're going to choose cleric because Kaalia is a cleric. We could also choose human because she is a human cleric. But, we're going to be choosing cleric. So we can tap it to add a colorless to our mana pool, or we can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type, and that spell can't be countered. So just another way to protect Kaalia from counter magic. I mean, Cavern of Souls is basically our only effective way to stop an actual counter spell from countering Kaalia. But, being in Mardu, you don't really have many options for answering counter spells. But Cavern of Souls lets us do that. So, then next we're going to take a look at our utility lands. So we have a Rogue's Passage, which will let us give something unblockable. We have Slayer's Stronghold. We can pay a red and a white and tap it. Give a creature +2/+0 in Vigilance and Haste. So, we can give Kaalia haste if we need to. Then we have Sunhome, Fortress of the Legion to give something double strike. Vault of the Archangel to give our entire team Death Touch and Lifelink. Then we have Bajuka Bog for that graveyard hate. And then we have Maze of Ith, which is not able to tap for any mana, but we can tap it to make target attacking creature become untapped, and then they don't deal any combat damage. So we can use that on Kaalia herself just to be able to get that attack trigger to, shoot something out of our hand, tapped and attacking, so that she essentially doesn't get into combat. If they have something on their side of the board that could easily just block her and kill her, we can use Maze of Ith to essentially remove her from combat but still get that attack trigger. Or, we can use it on one of our opponent's creatures that we don't want to hit us in the face. And then for our basics, if you remember, I did say that all of our basics are snow-covered basics, solely for Rhymescale Dragon, but, Rhymescale Dragon's ability is pretty potent, so that's why we're running exclusively snow-covered basics, and we run 3 of each. So we run 3 snow-covered mountains, 3 snow-covered swamps, and 3 snow-covered plains. So that rounds out the deck. That is it. That is my Kaalia of the Vast revisited. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, crush that thumbs up button. It really does help out a lot. Leave me some comments as well down in the comment section below of what you think of this particular iteration of my Kaalia deck. Like I said, it's gone through many, many changes over the course of its life. But I feel like this particular build of it is probably the most streamlined and the most effective out of all of the other builds that I've had for it. Just having so many assurances against, answers to Kaalia is going to be just very detrimental. Like I said, nothing's worse than playing Kaalia and not being able to play Kaalia. Not being able to have her stick on the board and get those attack triggers and, shoot out those big nasty creatures out of your hand and smash your opponent's face in. So yeah, again, that wraps up everything here. So again, do all of the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Again, I'll leave a link in the description below so you can check out the deck tech for this deck from way back in the day when Derek and I first started the channel, so you can kind of see how the deck has evolved over time. Again, there's been many, many changes to it in the course of its life that I might not necessarily have showcased here right now, but this is the current build that I have for Kaalia, and I think it works pretty well. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and that wraps up everything here. So I hope you all enjoyed watching this video of my Kaalia EDH/Commander deck tech, and this has been Jay with Tap and Turn Gaming, and we will catch you later in the next video. Thanks a lot for watching.